Hey Paul, how you doing?
Rich, how are you? Good afternoon, good morning, good
Oh,
day.
thanks a lot. How's the weather in Malta?
It is very pleasant. We hit about 18 today. I walked over to the souk and did a little shopping. Lots of people were out. A beautiful day in Malta.
We love Malta. Here, we'll give you a little view of the world for everybody. There we
Oh,
go.
all right.
We're in Malta. Is
See what you, oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, is that good? Is
That is
that Malta?
that's Valletta, which
Valletta?
is the city I live in.
Awesome.
And it's, oh, hold on.
This
No,
one?
that one's not that. I don't think that's Valletta. Yeah,
All
but
right. Well,
that
whatever it
it
is,
is
it's
Malta.
somewhere beautiful.
It's Maltese enough.
So we're
Sure.
doing our second podcast episode. The first one, by the way, got over 13 views and listens.
13 or over
I
13? Do you
represented
mean 14 or 13?
probably 14 by now because I listened to it in the car. So I'm 10 of the 14. So two of the four people who listened to it, one of them's probably you. This has been a great
I did.
experience. There you go.
Uh-huh. I
So
do we get to see demographics
oh
of
yeah,
our
no, I got the
listeners,
whole
or
demo
what do we
thing.
learn?
Yeah, unfortunately, over 40 seems to be our primary demo. That's a little bit
Well,
depressing if you ask me.
we're not selling vapes.
Yeah,
It's okay.
exactly. I think it should be okay. So what's going on in your world?
Oh, let's see what is happening. We spent a bunch of time jiggling around with our tech setup, and I think that's in good shape now.
Yeah,
What let's see, my big thing this week has been AI, which I think has been like a lot of the world's big thing this week.
I
And
agree.
I am in particularly focusing on prompt engineering, which I think is a super
Oh,
interesting new area. And it's so there's a lot of like knowing the course and knowing the terrain. There's a lot of invention, and I think it's funny sometimes what it takes to make an AI to make an LLM more effective and more responsive and give you more usable data. Um, so it's I think it's a super interesting field.
well, what do you want to try a little bit now?
Sure, we can mess around. I did learn a trick. Maybe we can actually do it, and you can hear about it the same time that we say it on
Yeah,
the pod here. Um, let's see. I want to do something that is what's a problem, a logic problem that has multiple steps to figure it out.
I love it.
What's an easy? Well, then you'll super love the next part.
Okay,
Um,
why don't
so
you lay it on
what?
me? Let's do a ChatGPT demo. So for those people who don't know, it's free. You just search for ChatGPT, and you're in, and you set a login, and they give you sort of best. You know, it's free, so sometimes it's slow, but you can try things. But let's pretend and let's try some prompts. 'Cause I think
But
prompt
do you
engineering.
know?
Don't you think prompt engineering is like the new programming, like the
It
new way?
is. It's just programming in in the richest language around, which is like natural language. Like
Yeah.
it's programming. Lots of it is in English, although it's one fun thing that I've tried is translation, which works great.
Well,
Just in the
give me some
prompt.
things to try.
So a translation that I did was how do you say good morning, safe travels in Vietnamese?
Oops. Well,
Uh-oh.
that's not so good. I failed.
Did you
Interesting.
have to sign in again? Oh, were you in a new chat for
I'll
that,
try.
or?
I'll try logging in again.
Okay. I have a tool that lets you bring up a chat GPT window with just a hotkey.
Yeah,
So, but that
I
one
have a little
also
pull
has,
down that does this.
okay. So, but the reason I mention it is it has that
Oh,
same
this is not
problem
going to
of just
happen
like
today.
running out of
It's running
the
out of
times out
something.
quickly.
Something's
Yeah.
bad here. Okay, well, I guess we're not doing this. So much for
So
online services. Let's move on to the next
yeah.
topic.
Well, so you were talking about how fast ChatGPT is learning and comparing it to the learning speed of a human reader.
Yeah.
So do you want to? I haven't heard this before. So can you tell me
Okay,
about it?
let me just elaborate. So I actually put this in last week's show. I should probably mention this. We have last week's show note at the Tom family. Everything here is here it is. So if you go to Tom Family, you're going to find the show notes. You can actually play it right here. But there's a lot of math. By the way, super cool that you can actually just stick this as a browser window in WordPress. But I just did a bunch of math about how to figure out how much it's taking, right? And it's super amazing because remember I said 100 billion years? It turns out I'm
Yeah.
not completely wrong, right? And the basic math is we have 86 billion neurons in the average head, and we run at
86
about
billion.
right. We run at about point. I'm just going to let me zoom this up a little bit because it is math. We run at about 0.1 to 2 hertz. So we basically cycle. Now, no one knows how much of our brain we actually use for thinking, right? So that's one of the questions. The second thing we know is that training ChatGPT takes about 1,000 to 10,000 NVIDIA A100 GPUs, and it takes 36 days, 34 days.
Oh,
And it
wow.
costs about
Cool.
$5 million
Okay.
just for the electricity. So that's not even amortizing the cost of the machines for a single run.
Wow. Just electricity.
Right.
Amazing.
Right. And
Wow.
so remember I said it costs $10 to $50 million to do a run. Well, we just have
Yep.
figures from Google's thing called Palm, and it's $34 million a run. For Facebook, which has got 78 billion parameters, it's about $5 million. So amazingly accurate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the second thing you have
Wow.
to, and there are some big models. So last week, Google announced their Palm model, and then Facebook actually completely open sourced their model. You can do anything you want, and there's a link here. So then, remember I said this thing that's like 20 to 100 billion years of thinking, and what could we learn? So I spent way too much time thinking about this. Yeah.
And I thought that was just like throwing a dart at the wall, but
It
you
was
had good aim with your
completely
dart.
throwing a dart at the wall. But it turns out I'm not completely wrong. So here's the math. If you have 1,000 A100s and you want to compare it with one person figuring things out in 20 years. By the way, Paul, don't you think this is the perfect program manager question?
Yeah, this would be great. I'm
This
sure
would
people
be
will be using this
a
next
classic one. So let's do some
among our
math.
13 listeners. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you, me, and someone else. So you have 8 working hours. Suppose you have 8 working hours a day. You don't get any holidays, so you basically work 200 days. That's a nominal, I guess you get 2 weeks of vacation. You don't get anything special. And you work for 20 years.
Off. Yeah. Yep.
So you have about 40,000 hours where you're thinking away. So now the question is, what's firing, right? So there's 86 billion neurons. It turns out 60% of our brain is dedicated to important things like breathing, but our upper cortex is about 40% of it. So there's about 34 billion neurons that could potentially be recruited. As I said, they run at about 0.1 to 10 hertz. And you can see where the errors are getting crazy, right? So let's call 1 hertz. So we so basically we do about 3 quintillion, 3 to the 10 to the 18th computations in 20 years, right?
Okay.
You do all that math out. That's actually kind of a hard thing to estimate. So, and then the second problem is you're probably not spending all of your brain cells thinking 100% on a single problem. It doesn't work that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So probably somewhere between, the easy way to think about it is, let's say somewhere between 4 to 40 billion neurons are firing at 0.1 to 10 hertz. And so the easy way to think about it is how many neuron fires per second are we doing? Turns out if you do all the math, it's somewhere between 400 million neurons firing to 400 billion. So there's a 1,000 error of estimate just on the neurons firing.
Yep.
So here's the second question. It turns out and this is kind of amazing, each of those GPUs does 140,000 terabytes of teraflops, so trillions of floating-point
Wow.
operations per
Wow.
second,
Wow.
right? And so 1,000 GPUs does 140,000 teraflops, right?
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
That,
Okay.
by the way, that's 140 million gigaflops. Right. Just says it's a lot, right?
Wow. Wow.
And so then you
Wow.
say, so
Million
basically,
gigaflops.
then you have to figure out, well, each floating point, um, we'll get to in a second, but how many flops are equal to calculating a weight, right? So, these
Mm-hmm.
parameters are weights. So between one flop to 10 flops, I said, right? So, it takes time. You have to do some instructions, and then you multiply A times B, and that's how you calculate a weight. So you have to divide it down by between 1 and 10. So that's 140,000 to 14,000 terawatts per second.
Terawatts.
Right.
Okay.
So now the next thing you have to say is, okay, what's really happening is inside this gigantic model, there's something, and I miscalled it last time, it's called a multi-layer perceptron, called an MLP. And it's sort of the simplest
Okay.
possible neural network. And the model is actually what a neuron does, which is takes n inputs and produces m outputs. That's basically what a neuron does. It's got a bunch of things that excite it and then it fires, right? And so if you assume the average neuron has between 5 to 50 connections in and out, it's sort of like a matrix, right? 10, like just pick the simple case, 10 inputs in, 10 inputs out, right? And that would be a matrix of 100, right? And so you have to do 100 multiplies to figure out one multi-level perceptron. Running the math, that means that you need 10 to 1,000 weights per MLP. And so in a 170 billion parameter model, roughly speaking, it's 17 billion MLP. So basically, that's the number of neurons that's encapsulated inside ChatGPT.
Okay.
Right. So it's actually on the high estimate, it's about the same order as a human brain. That's one thing you learn, right? It's basically a human brain, but running a lot faster. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the cycle time? Well, we're throwing 140 to 440,000 terawatts per second. And what you learn is, again, doing more math, that's about 14,000 terawatt neuron firings per second. The punchline is the human brain, so basically the civilian runs at 115 billion to 14 quintillion firings. And we run at about 400 million to 400 billion. So if you do the math, roughly one human is equal to between 30 to 3,500 years of computer work. So if you're a human working away, then ChatGPT is running at 30 to 3,500 times your speed. Right?
Okay. All right.
Make sense? Right?
Yeah, there's that factor of 1,000 again.
Yeah.
Okay.
So put this in.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. Put another way, that 20 years you spend in computer time is between 180 years and 52,000 years. Right? So if I sat there for 50, so the guy said, well, you're working for 20 years, what's that the equivalent of? Well, at the low end, that's like ChatGPT working for 180 years. At the high end, it's 52,000 years, so 52 millennia. And you just got to believe you're going to make something out of it. But here's the interesting thing. You can think of ChatGPT like a single organism, that's a single run. But in fact, we've had a lot of generations, right? So ChatGPT has been in development for 3 years, and it's sort of like kids, right? So there was ChatGPT 1. It grew up and it taught ChatGPT 2, and then it taught ChatGPT 3. So each one of those is like a generation. So the way when I think about it is in 20 years, how many generations can actually happen? And again, doing some rough math. So conservatively, let's say this is the third generation. Let's say there are probably between 10 and 1,000 intermediate generations, right? So that 180 to 52,000 years becomes between 5.4 and 156 million years of computation in 20 years. Right? So here's the other thing that's interesting. Of course, ChatGPT didn't learn just from its own brethren. It learned from all the other research that's happening. Right? So you can think about AIs like someone at Facebook learns a bunch of things, they publish it. That's like a generation passing on its knowledge from grandparent to grandkids. So we've been doing this learning thing for 9 years across all these versions. So there's probably another 1,000 to 10,000 generations of other entities that feed into ChatGPT, right? Because it really takes a village, right? So if you run that math, 20 years human time is equal to either 5,400 years, so 5.4 millennia, or 156 billion years. Hooray! So 100 billion years is not wrong, right? So basically, what we're basically thinking is that 20 years that guy had is not 20 years of human time. 156 billion years. Just to explain it, that's basically the lifetime of our universe.
Wow.
So heat death.
Wow.
So you got to think that if you would probably get farther than understanding the word "hello world" on a sheet of paper after having the entire time on the planet, in the universe to figure things out. And probably, if we really did this and you slid the thing under the table, you probably would have figured out faster than light travel and have an entire civilization inside of it. It's an awful long time. So that's my contribution. I was not wrong.
That is awesome.
There you go, man.
I love those things. I mean, and that is a super cool explanation and very thoughtful and compelling and clear. But I do love those things where the random, not random, but just the sort of arbitrary sounding guesses. You are called on to guess something that is just utterly outside your experience, and you just have to
do it.
And I love when those things work. It's just, I mean, that's I don't know if that's your internal neural network, taking the vague data that it's got and lumping it all together and giving you an answer out of some kind. But I don't know. I just love that.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing where you can take any arbitrary problem, like how much does a 747 weigh, or how many years is equivalent to 20 years, and you can make a bunch of assumptions and actually come up with a bunch of numbers, and it could be right. How cool is that?
Yep. The back of the envelope calculation is great.
Yeah.
So at the NVIDIA Developers Conference this week, Jensen Huang said that in the next, I think it was 10 years, but some relatively short time period, they expect to accelerate AI by a factor of 1 million.
Oh my God.
So
crap.
That's fine.
So what you're saying is
far more than Moore's law, right? So it's just eating the world.
Yeah. Well, and remember, that means that my 150 billion year calculation is now a million times off. Right. So now we're talking about 156 million billion years in 20 years. Think about that. It's going to do what Jensen says. It's going to. We are just at the beginning of this thing. Cool, man.
It's incredible, and it's all over. It's all over the popular culture now. I got a Facebook message from somebody, like a guy who works in quick serve restaurants in Michigan, and he said, I read this thing, I read this article, and AI is taking over the world. What do you think? And it was the story about the Google guy from a few months ago. I forget his name.
Oh yeah, I'm about to listen to a podcast where he's interviewed, so I can't wait. It's
cool.
in my index.
Sounds great.
I'll send you the link for that. So what's going on in your world, Paul?
Well, let's see. It was a little bit of a slow week. Right?
Slow week in your life is infinitely fast.
Well, no, it was literally factually slow. So it was. I really tech terms. I just looked at prompt engineering and looked into tips and tricks and jailbreaks and workarounds and chain of thought and how to improve prompts, and so I'm getting a little deeper in that.
It's going to be a miracle. I think it's going to be a miracle. I did the same thing, and with 4 prompts, I taught. I got a Python program that that can automatically take input anywhere in the world. Right? It wrote a JavaScript application,
Wow.
integrated Flask, used Leafly, and takes input and then draws a circle and then shows you the points around any place in the world and produces it in a file that's suitable to feed to a drone.
Oh my God. With
Right.
4 prompts.
With 4 prompts. And it literally was, please take as input latitude and longitude and a distance from a user, write a Python program that does this, and then output in, it's called Q ground control, but in this format, it's sort of a compressed ASCII format, output that in a form acceptable. And it did it. And then the next prompt was, and provide a user interface where you can add lat long and then use GeoPy to correctly calculate the distances. And it did it. And then I said, and add a web interface that allows the user to input it, and then it added Flask.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Productivity is about to go 1,000 times higher.
It's 1,000 times, Rich.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I have to wrap up for today.
No problem.
Some other folks to talk to, but always fun to see you. Always fun to have our chats. Thanks for walking through all of that.
Yeah, you guys,
all of the 100 million years.
Yeah, and I think the math is wrong in there somewhere, so I have to keep correcting it, but it's somewhere in that range. Okay, Paul. See you soon.
Good. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rich.